Hi, everybody. Welcome back to The Author Tells. This week we have Sacha Fortuné, who is the author of Climbing the Walls, the first book in the Heart and Cold series. It's a book that I've really enjoyed editing and I've looked forward to reading on the app. And I'm really excited to have Sacha on here to talk about her characters and her story in depth. So, turning it over to Sacha. Sacha, starting with just the Heart and Cold series as a whole completely. How did you go about this series and how did you conceptualize it? I believe you once told me that it was almost 15 years ago that you had the ideas for these characters and you've been with them for so long. So how did you get inspiration for it?
Okay, sure. So, well, hi everyone. I am going to talk about my Heart and Cold series. I'm excited for that, right? So, let's see. The first version of this book in its original draft was somewhere around 2002. So that was 19 years ago. You can imagine how long ago that that conceptualization was. And the first version would have been finished probably a year later after that. At that point, I'd written novels geared towards children and teens because that's how old I was at the time. So you kind of write what you know. And I was prepared to write something for adults. So directly prior to this series, I had written something similar to like Sweet Valley High, back in the 90s and 80s.
Oh,
They had
yeah.
loads of viewpoints and loads of drama and all these things with, teenagers. And I said to myself, okay, I want to write for adults. I wasn't passionate about the college series, so I wanted to go post-marriage, post-kids. So I jumped from young adult to all the way into a marriage that's been going on for a while. And yeah, I had all these burning questions. Is cheating forgivable? Can two people from very different backgrounds sustain a marriage long term? Can a man and a woman be just friends? Can you be soulmates with someone that's not romantic love? Can you forgive someone for cheating? Can you raise another man's child? Can you survive your own family dysfunction and build something good? And then, of course, as a woman, can you have it all? So from all of those burning questions, my characters were born. The first vision was the white rose, which is the symbol of Chris and Nicole's marriage. And the first character was Nicole. So now you know. And from there, yeah, it just spiraled into something that, gosh, it got out of control for me to the point where I had to pull it back and say, okay, what is my story actually about? What's actually happening? What's the story here? And from there, Climbing the Walls was born.
Okay, well, it's really interesting to know that Nicole was the first one that you conceptualized because she is definitely a fiery woman and you can see kind of the youth in her still alive. I can now see the perspective that you didn't conceptualize this character when you were at the age you are right now. You can see the kind of maturity in the other characters, but Nicole has that tinge of immaturity that makes it her character, not in a bad way, but that makes her who she is. But what was the inspiration behind Nicole, Chris, Darren, and the rest of the characters? Was it any inspiration from your life, from the people around you, or just kind of a general wonderment of what marriage would be and what kind of different marriages exist out there?
Probably closer to what you said, where it's me wondering. I'm actually a little worried where my characters come from because did I put them in my head? Am I hearing spirits? I was always a bit of a weirdo as a child living in my own world. And I started reading and writing from very young. So I had stories that I would create, stories that I think, they bloomed from what my ideas of life were like. And then all of my female characters probably have a little bit of me in them. Probably all the worst bits, Nicole's absent-mindedness and her, kind of insecurity as a mother and wondering detachment of that. Louisa and her tendency to bolt and run away and throw the men in her life together to figure things out. All the worst parts are probably a little bit of me.
So, and the best parts? Who are the best parts inspired from?
I think every swashbuckling hero in your life, there's a bit of Darren. He's a bit of a expletive hair, but you love him anyway. So I think those kind of characters were the ones that you tune in to watch on a TV series. You're like, okay, he's annoying everyone, but you love him, So those were more of the, I guess, fabricated ones. The men are more fabricated than the women.
That's very interesting. So, did you, like you said, you've had so many characters, and Climbing the Walls is just the first book, and it has a lot of themes involved as well. Like you spoke about, of treating spouses and soulmates without a love connection, and etc. Why did you choose to have so many different elements and themes be highlighted in the book? And which one would you say is kind of closest to your heart? Which one do you feel for the most?
I think infidelity is the biggest theme here. It's played off in different ways, but we always talk about that as young people, as adults growing up. What level is forgivable? Is it a kiss okay? Is something that's, if someone's texting someone, is that like, what level is forgivable? Up to what level can you say, okay, I'm with someone and they did something, but, we can move on. So I go from non-existent, literally, which is Nicole and Darren, nothing really happens in terms of infidelity at the beginning, and then to Louisa and Darren, where I don't want to give away the whole plot.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think we should avoid the spoiler.
He's made a huge decision in his life to kind of move on from something that happened and accept certain things and still be married to someone. So I think that's one of the biggest themes. And I've also thought about things like the intricacies of what sex represents, especially married sex. We don't write about it, we don't talk about it. You see a little blip of it on TV, and it's not something that I think most people want to focus on when they write romance, because it's kind of boring. They're like, okay, well, we've done that. The couple is together, and you don't see what happens after the I do. And I always wondered, okay, what does happen after the I do? They go riding off into the sunset? No, that's not.
Definitely,
that's not what happens. That's not what happens.
For sure, I think that.
And I also.
No, please continue.
Sorry. Yeah, I also like the idea of masculinity and femininity and the types of friendships you build. So I took time to have Nicole be someone who's struggling with female relationships. She finds a friend in Karina. She doesn't trust her. That kind of animosity is always going to be there. And then Nicole also annihilates Louisa because she thinks, Darren deserves better. And I really like the masculine friendships when, like Chris and Darren, book 2 is going to surprise you. I know we're still talking book 1, but Chris and Darren, can they ever become friends, really? I tried to find a way. So I like being able to build that, concept of what is a man and what does he represent, and, what do women look for in their men. And they have to be able to support their women. They also have to be able to, be their own person and command a scene, command everything around them in a certain way. And I think the final big theme I want to mention is the kind of hate you have when you're in a relationship for your partner. We all hate, you hate them a little bit. There's a fine line. Like, for instance, with Nicole and Chris, she loves him, but she's also thinking, okay, he's so perfect, it makes me look bad. Those kind of little.
Correct. There is that resentment that comes through.
I think that is always a bit of resentment.
Yeah, that's an excellent theme, something that's not explored very well in contemporary and women fiction. I feel the fact that, number one, there's a messy side to relationships, especially we see romance novels end with happily ever after. Heart and Cold is not that. It's about finding the happy in the messy ever after. I think that's what
exactly
really interesting. Yes.
I like that you said that. I like that you said that, because every romance, especially movies, there's this big sweeping moment that, someone's rushing to confess their love in the nick of time. And if I ever write that, someone please shoot me. I don't, it's not that it doesn't happen in real life. It's just that I think, real romance and real love have deeper moments than something like that, where it's just a showy kind of love at that particular moment.
That's
you have to really be able to understand who you're with and move into that with them.
That's right, because a lot of times movies and books end where the story actually begins. The getting together is just a very small part of the story. The living together, surviving together, and building a life is the true story, which is exactly what Heart and Cold really deep dives into. We don't see how these characters got together. We just see glimpses of that for all the books. But we see after they've gotten together how they're struggling to be together, despite, like how you said, there is resentment, there is hate, but there is also love. And I think that's something I've seen in real life with a lot of married couples. I'm not married per se, but I've seen that in my life with married couples. And I think that's really interesting that I finally got to read a book, fiction book, that shows the reality of marriages. And one theme that I particularly loved was the fact that Nicole and Darren's friendship was, it tests the waters. I'm not going to say what happens, the spoilers, but it's a really worthwhile friendship. I think there's something really special brimming there. I'm going to leave it at that to tease the people watching this interview right now. Yeah.
As you mentioned that, now when I first published the book, or was about to publish the book, well, book one had existed for some time, and then I lent my friend book one, which is Climbing the Walls, and she's like, okay, where's the rest of the story? Where's the rest of the book? So at this point, I had book two kind of halfway done, and because she was so interested in it, I kept writing, and I finished book three, which is like the second half of their story, Louisa and Darren's story, in like a couple of months. It just came like bam, and I think because of that kind of, way that it was written, I realized that, there's so much messiness and so much of that I wanted to bring across. But because of the, I guess, you have to have the passion to write it, and you have to have the readers wanting that passion. And when she said, okay, what's the name of the series? I didn't have a name for it. And then I said, it's about Nicole and Darren. Whatever I write, they're always going to be there. So that's how it came. Hart, which is Darren's last name, and Cole, which is Nicole's author name. So it came together way after, like 15 years after the conceptualization.
Oh, wow.
Finally got a title. Finally got a title.
I mean, I must say, when I first read the books, I read, of course, Climbing the Walls first, and I hated Darren. I genuinely did not like the character. I think I remember telling you this after reading the first one and just like frantically messaging you, like, I don't like this character. I'm just letting you know. And then you read books two and three, and by the end of book two, you already know Darren is the star. He is the star of the book, and he's a hot character. He's a sexy character. And as infuriating as he is so great to read. 100%. And you just see him come to life in book two, fighting for his wife and fighting for his children. And that, I think, it's really interesting because he's set up as the anti-hero in book one. So that's what I loved about it, and how that just shows you the writing and great storytelling, because you told the story in a great manner to get someone to hate the character and then love them. That doesn't happen often, especially now with me. Once I hate a character, I hate them.
I know, and guys who are watching this, Aakriti does not like Chris, or did not like him. I don't know if she likes him by now. She wasn't fond of Chris, and people start off liking him, and then they hate him. So I think that's the only one where he has a different kind of character arc than everyone else.
Now that you mentioned it, I feel like I must say, though people watching this are going to think I'm mad, especially if they've read the first few episodes. I didn't like Chris from, I think, episode 6, 7 onwards. I really started disliking him. Like, genuinely, I was just rooting for Nicole the entire time, because it just felt as if she was trying so hard, and Chris was out there to be this mightiest of all parents, and that annoyed me, because you can make out that, like you said, can a woman have it all? And Nicole is, I mean, okay, so she fails at certain times, but she's trying. It's not like she isn't trying. She's trying to have the work. She's trying to be an author in the books, and she's trying to be a mother. And then she feels alienated from her children. I can't imagine something worse than that. So, that was the reason why I wasn't the biggest fan of Chris. But
I think oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, that was my end.
I was just going to say that Chris is the guy that thinks he's a great partner because he sees himself being supportive. And that is actually a problem in relationships, where men get credit for the smallest things. Women have to try so much harder, and men show up and it's like, oh, he's such a great dad. He's such a great husband. He's this, he's that. And then they judge the poor woman who's trying at the sideline. So with Chris, he does not give her room to grow into motherhood. He doesn't fundamentally understand her. He doesn't appreciate that she's building from nothing. He expects her to be the mother she never had and the mother he never had. So I'm like, okay, he really is putting a lot on her, and it takes time to kind of work that around and all the different edits that it went through. I really wanted to show that without, saying this is what he's doing, but you
That's right.
do get a sense of, he's expecting way too much from his wife in putting all of that on her, and then being this great parent that she has to always be the shadow of as well. So yeah.
Yes, that's excellent. Actually, coming to that, you said that you've gone through a series of edits, and I know for Climbing the Walls, this is the third edition that you've put out. So, why did you go through three major edits? Like, what was the process behind that?
Well, the first one was just way too long. I think knowing my characters, and I wanted to build all of the stories in the first one. And I got feedback from readers. We love the book, but it's just too long. It took me forever to read it. And then as I continued reading, especially more self-published books, because I think when I started writing it, this was before self-publishing was any kind of thing. And, I don't think we had established in the industry certain limits, because with self-published books, you see stories that are written in 6 parts when it really could have been one book. And I think based on how that feedback went the first time, I said, okay, I read more self-published books. I said, maybe I should cut it down. And then when I handed it to Saga, which it was already whittled down a bit, they mentioned certain scenes I could have cut out. And I thought about it and I said, okay, that Brian's daughter crushing on Chris and his sister, their background, there's certain things I said, okay, I could live with those cuts. And there was only one I couldn't follow, which was to get rid of the kindergarten teacher. Yeah. There's enough drama there that I couldn't. I spoke to Chris, my character, and I said, okay, Chris, what do you want me to do? And he said, no, leave her.
Chris wants her to be left in, as if he's going to tell you to remove her. You should ask Nicole that question. We should have seen what she says.
Oh my God. No, he has to really embarrass himself. And I don't think embarrassing himself with a stranger that he never has to see again is quite as embarrassing. So if his breakdown happened in a bar or even in front of his friend Vicky, it wouldn't be enough embarrassing, because I'm thinking to myself, okay, after this scenario with the teacher, he still has to go and show up and see her and be humiliated. So I'm like, yeah, he has to. Yeah, I felt really sorry for Chris at a certain point, because I threw everything but the kitchen sink at him. He lost his parents, his sister, his friend, as well as losing faith in Nicole twice in a very short space of time. So I just dumped everything on him.
You really put him through the ringer. I feel like you've put all your characters through a ringer, no doubt. You've thrown unfortunate situations at them. We've seen that in book 2 and 3, which are upcoming on the Saga app. But yeah, they've definitely gone through a ringer. But tell me more about your writing process, Sasha, because you've said you've been writing these books for 19 years. And like you said, after writing the first book and the second and third were like kind of closely followed. So what kind of is it like madness of a writing where you get up at 12 in the night and write chapter after chapter? Or do you have kind of like a process and a discipline set where you're writing 1,000 words a day?
Yeah, there's no discipline. I'll be honest with you. I wish I had more discipline. And lately I've been trying to, put that discipline in myself, where at least I sit, and even if I don't write, I read over some of what I've written before, so that the story is always fresh in my mind. But in terms of the first version of the first book was really messy. I still have files with scrap notes with really random ideas that made no sense in the long term. I just cancel a bunch of things. But my best process, I think, is just to sit with my books late at night and say, okay, what's supposed to happen? I take notes and eventually try and put those notes into some kind of outline. Mm-hmm. And, every time I have to go back to them, at least I know, okay, coming up, this is what's supposed to happen. This is what's supposed to happen. But generally, the discipline does not follow. But having the process is part of it. And I do want to get more disciplined in the future, because I have at least 3 more books in the series, and they're not going to get written if I don't find some discipline to actually write them. So yes.
That's quite interesting, no doubt. So coming back to Chris and Nicole, who are the leading characters for Climbing the Walls, of course, you have Darren, Louisa, who are just complex as Chris and Nicole. But speaking about just the first 2 characters, what when you were writing them, did you kind of write them to be fleshed out for, like a TV show role almost? Because they read like that for sure. And what was one of the most characteristics that you found difficult to mold them into, but you also thought was really important for them to have?
Okay, so I've always seen them, like I visually picture my stories. Definitely, I would love to take this into a TV series. So anyone on Netflix, if you're watching, yeah. So no, my really low moments, I think, or my darkest moments for my characters are those that you build them up to be something, and then in their low moments they say something that you're like, oh wow. So for Chris, it was at the beginning of the story, he mentions, his wife is this great writer. She has all these jobs. She makes more money than him. And he's like, oh, that's great. I don't mind. I love her. I support her. And then when with a little bit of alcohol and, some, like I said, throwing the kitchen sink at him, he starts to say things like, she used to love me when she didn't make so much money. And that's one of those things that I'm like, that's what a man like him, a good guy, would say when he's put in that kind of position. And similarly for Nicole, she's trying to make friends with a female relationship. She's trying, and in the moment, something happens with her and Chris, she's like, "Oh, you're after my husband." Those kind of those reflex moments where you go to that dark place immediately, and the other person has to be like, "Okay, where did that come from?" But it's always at the back of your mind. Those kind of dark thoughts when the chips are down, your mind goes immediately to the worst case scenario. And I think those are the darkest parts or the hardest parts to write, because you love your characters, but they do have their flaws. They do have their moments where it's like, whew, yeah.
Definitely. I think Chris and Nicole have had those dark, complex moments. All your characters have had, which makes them that much more real, for sure. So I know that your children and your children, I'm saying, your books are like your children for you. They are like your babies. Your characters are so close to your heart. And yet you've gone through a rigorous editorial process, not once, not twice, but 3 times. How difficult is it for you to every time kind of hear advice and feedback where you're kind of toning down and skimming through the books more and more? Is it something that really that you're really against? I mean, I know you're not really against it because you've done it, but how do you agree to do that when you've kind of written these characters from such a deep place in your heart?
Sure. Well, you mentioned my books are my babies, and yes, I have a son. I must say, I'm sorry, but the books came first. They were my first babies. They brought me a lot of pain, a lot of joy. And every time I go back to them, first of all, I always find typos. I've probably read these things dozens of times. I still find typos. I think I just have to let it go sometimes and keep fixing as I go, because even traditionally published books that great writers, I found typos in those as well. So that's part of it. I know I'll find mistakes. And in terms of just editing down, every time I have to go back in, I have to take a little moment and say, okay. Yeah, it takes a good bit out of me to overhaul them each time. But I think I'm happy with where, especially Climbing the Walls is right now. I think the other two, I didn't have as much to cut in terms of actual scenes or, so many things, because they came when I was a more adult. Well, I was an adult writer. I was a more mature writer. And I knew how to do certain things by that point. That the first book, just because I was a teenager myself, I didn't really do as I probably would have done if I was a bit older. So I'm happy to keep fixing until I'm comfortable with it. I'm finally in a place like that with Climbing the Walls. And I think going forward, I've changed the format of how I write and how I space my word template, so I know how many pages it should be and those types of things. I've made those changes so that when I'm writing, I know, okay, if I plan for it to be 300 pages and I'm around 150, has the big event happened yet? Those kind of things. Right. It's easier now as I'm older. Before, I just kind of wrote everything and then figured editing would fix it. So, yeah.
Yes. Just kind of like word vomit on the page, because you have great ideas and thoughts. So just put everything down on paper and then we'll cut it out. But I think, yes, through the years, you've noticed that that's not the best way to maybe go about it. And for sure, I think personally as well, I did think book 2 was stronger just in terms of characters, because it seemed as if Darren is more a part of you than Chris was. but I may be wrong. That's just what I felt as a reader. But speaking about your characters, you have so many of them. First off, can you tell us about the Heart and Coal series in its entirety? Because we are going to have book two and book three, Pandora's Poison and Pandora's Price, coming very soon as well, being released again. And you are writing more books in the series. So tell us
Yes.
about the rest of the characters and then tell us which is your favorite character.
Okay, sure. So book two and book three, they're really one story that I broke into two books. Apart from the length, it was just there was a kind of a certain point where I said, okay, this is where the story kind of needs to pause for a bit. There needs to be some breathing room before it dives back in. So those focused on Darren and Louisa, and I enjoyed book two and three more. You're right, I did. But I also love that Nicole and Chris are still very much there. Their story doesn't end with book one. You still see them going through a bit of a struggle behind the scenes through Darren, through Louisa, and through Vicky. You see, she mentions, okay, what's happening with Chris and Nicole. So there's a lot of continuity throughout the books. So beyond book three, I have planned for book four, Brian and Stacy. And beyond that, the one I'm waiting on, Vicky and Gianni. They are the homewreckers, but you love them already. And by the time you get there,
I feel we shouldn't say more about that book. I feel it's a big spoiler.
Okay, well, let's not go too deep into it, but I do have those two books planned already for sure. Definitely, I have the whole story in my head. I just need to get it down on paper, and those will be ready for publication, hopefully within the next year or two. I want to focus on those characters. And the problem, I think, with writing a series is you have to write it in order, right? So I would like to focus on book five, but I need to do book four first. And I have to get through the darkness to get to the fun parts.
That's right. I am also dying to read book five. I wish you could skip over book four. We have to read that story
I wish
first.
I could too. I wish I could too, but I can't. Sadly, it has to happen. Things have to be set up in one book to prepare for the other one, and that's
right.
part of writing a series.
So, which is your favorite character then?
Oh gosh, Darren.
Knew that was coming.
Yeah, I think Darren's going to be everyone's favorite character because you hate him, you really hate him by the end of book one, and
You
then you even hate him for half of book two, and then as it goes on, you say, okay, he's making a stance. He is becoming a man. He is a man that didn't have a dad growing up, and he's kind of building his own masculinity. And he's looking at Chris, for examples, and he's like comparing himself to Chris, and he's looking at, okay, what would I be as a father? He's really, really pushing himself to become a better man. And I like that he is able to grow from, his naivety or his youthfulness when he first married Louisa. He becomes a different person by the end of book three.
Definitely. I think that is what is similar between Nicole and Darren is the fact that they both know they're struggling to be the best version of themselves. They want to be the best husband slash wife, the best father slash mother, and just, a better version of themselves. Whereas Chris, and I really can't say that for Louisa, but for Chris, he thinks he's done it all. He's a good brother, he's a good husband, he's a good father, he's a good friend and an employee and a boss. He thinks he is the good man, period. Whereas Nicole and Darren continuously put themselves in the category of being hellish and being troublemakers. So I think that makes it really interesting because you automatically then have sympathy for Nicole and Darren. It just comes as a reader because they doubt themselves. And I feel every one of us doubts inside yourself. You're not sure, you're insecure, you're underconfident, and you see those glimpses in them. That's very interesting. So which character of yours do you think was the most difficult to write for you?
I think maybe Louisa, because she's very flawed, and I think going in, a lot of people are not going to like her, especially when they read the preview at the end of book one. I'm not sure how it's going to be reflected on the Saga app, but you see a bit of it from her perspective. And she kind of pushes her husband to a point where she plays victim. And I think that's something that we also don't see reflected anywhere well enough. There's always, okay, a man does something, a woman is a victim, but she actually puts herself in a position where she's like, okay, what do I do? She's always plotting and thinking and disliking certain things about him and leaning towards, this big love she has in her mind that she wants. And I don't know how realistic her concept of love is. She expects certain things, but she hasn't brought enough to the table herself. And I think that's also why I had to make her a great sister to her younger brother and a great mother, because there has to be something redemptive in her as a character. There are those parts of it, but in terms of a partner, she has a lot of work to do to really, become that person that deserves Darren at the end. Because if he's going to go through this whole arc, she has to meet him halfway, right? And everyone else keeps telling her, this man loves you. What's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? And she has to be the one to realize, okay, I need to grow up. I need to be a woman. I need to be a partner. I need to be in this. So I think she was difficult to write, but I enjoyed her by the end. And I do love her. She is close to my heart, but I am looking forward to dealing with Vicky and, other women in the series. I hope they may bring me more joy than Louisa did.
Yeah, Louisa doesn't exactly spark joy. She is a difficult character to read. So I can only imagine that she was difficult to write, for sure. I think lastly, there's two questions more just to ask. For the Heart and Cold series, what would you say to your readers as your parting words? Just as someone who's not read the books, what would you say to them?
I think it's an epic story that you haven't read anywhere else. You haven't seen it anywhere else. I can't even compare it to anything that I have seen. And I look at a lot of shows. I look at a lot of, romances, a lot of TV dramas. I read a lot of books. I haven't seen anything that I can definitely say this is like that. It's unique in its own way. It has similar themes to a lot of things, but I would love to engage with readers. And first, you need to meet my characters for that to happen. So go get the app and, start reading and, let me know what you love and what you don't love, what you dislike, what you hate. I really want that feedback from readers because that's what got me to write book 2 and 3, So if I get that kind of energy, it will really propel me to keep on writing. And these characters, they can grow with me. They can grow with the love from readers. So I'm looking forward to that kind of engagement.
Great. Yes. I think Climbing the Walls sparks conversation for sure. And I think readers should go read it. Season 1 is completely free on the app. So that, it's time to dig your hands into it and, take a bite out of these characters. And by the time you're eating them, you're going to realize how much you love them for sure. And lastly, to ask you, besides Climbing the Walls, what would you like to read on the Saga Fiction app?
Okay, sure. So firstly, I have to plug my short story collection. Amalgamated Darkness is also on the app. Those are 8 short stories from over the years that, I'm glad Saga finally found a home for them. So there's that as well, I think I would recommend. And apart from that, I've been really swamped getting my own books ready for release, but I do want to put aside some time to check out some of my fellow authors' works. I love multi-genre, prolific writers. So I'm going to say Varun, is it called Polanyi's?
Yes.
Novel, and Who Saves the Hero. So I started reading the first few episodes of those. I also really liked Virtually in Love and his love play, and I'm making space to read the entire chunks of them. I know they're coming in bite-sized pieces, but yeah, I am excited about lots of the things I'm seeing coming out. And there's also new releases that I'm sure will be added in due course. So I keep checking back to see what's tickling my fancy. Yeah. So if you haven't got it yet, please guys go get the app and get reading.
Yes, please listen to Sasha, get the app, read Climbing the Walls because we love it and we think you're going to love it as well. So yes, thank you. Thank you, Sasha, for coming on the show and talking through about your characters. I think it was a great discussion.
Sure. And thanks for having me. And like I said, please guys, go get the app, read. Please meet my characters. They've been waiting for almost 2 decades to meet you all. So yeah.
That's lovely. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Okay, take care. Bye.